Hey everybody, we are back with Thoughts Are Things by Prentice Mulford. We are on Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is called Look Forward, and this is a great chapter. And before we get started here, now I was just thinking before we started this chapter, and this is any old school prosperity book, and especially this one. This one's kind of special because this one's even going back even farther into the mid 1800s, because remember, Prentice Mulford passed away in 1896. This book, Thoughts Are Things, were published after he passed away. So this book was published in 1908, but these are all the manuscripts and essays that Prentice Mulford was working on and writing back in the mid 1800s. So so when we're talking about all these details, and he's giving examples. I was just sitting here before we started this chapter, I was just sitting here thinking, like, isn't it kind of astounding a little bit that the same examples they give, the same struggles people had back in the mid 1800s, the same exact things are the same today in 2024. The only thing different in 2024 is we have better technology. Okay, that's the only thing that's different. Okay, but how people are feeling, the examples, is exactly the same. Even when you look at metaphysics, metaphysics, in my opinion, has not gained any more advancement than it was in the 1850s. Or if you study biblical times or biblical texts or spiritual texts, it all comes from spiritual text. That's what really abundance comes from. That's what really all these manifesting techniques come from. It's from biblical texts. Even if you want to look at spiritual texts, you're talking about thousands of years ago. You're not just talking about 150 years ago, 200 years ago. I mean, like, things are not advancing. It's almost everything's like on a cycle. Everything's on a vicious cycle. So, that's what kind of, got me thinking here when I was like sitting here thinking. It's like, it's kind of amazing that the same struggles they had in the 1850s is the same struggles we have today. The same mental struggles that were back in the 1850s is the same mental struggles today. The same concept of poverty in the 1850s is the same concept of poverty we have today. It's never have changed. It's just we're just regurgitating information. That's all we're doing here. So that's my little rant before we get started here. But anyway, let's continue on to Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is called Look Forward. And let's get rocking and rolling here. The tendency with many people after they are a little advanced in years is to look backward with regret. Isn't it so true? I mean, I'm in a habit of that too. I'm in my 40s. Okay, we always have a habit of looking backwards. Looking backwards, I should have did this. We regret doing something, or we regret not doing something. Maybe nowadays in 2024, maybe we regret not going to college. Maybe we regret not going to college when we were younger. You know what I mean? We're always looking back with regrets, or we think we're too old to do something. I mean, that's a whole nother way to kind of twist in here. But the tendency with many people after they are a little advanced in years is to look backward with regret. The looking should be the other way, forward. No, we should look forward, not backwards. You ever hear the saying that when you're driving in a car, you can't just focus your attention on your rear view mirror. You can't always just be looking backwards. If not, you can never drive the car forward. I mean, that's kind of an analogy a little bit. If you're trying to drive the car, trying to stay on the road, trying to stay focused driving forward, you can't just focus your attention in the rearview mirror. You would crash the car if you never looked forward. But a lot of people are doing this. We spend a lot of listen to this. We spend a lot of our time just constantly thinking backwards. Constantly thinking backwards and regret. Okay, a lot of our thoughts that we have, we're letting our thoughts run wild. A lot of thoughts that we have is constantly looking backward, and it's on a repetitive cycle. And we're constantly doing it. We're doing it redundantly throughout the whole day. Let me read this short paragraph really quick here, then we'll move on. The tendency with many people after they are a little advanced in years is to look backward with regret. The looking should be the other way, forward. We should be looking forward. If you want to go backward in every sense, mental and physical, keep on cultivating the mood of living regretfully in your past life. It is one chief characteristic of the material mind to hold tenaciously to the past. It likes to recall the past and mourn over it. The material mind has a never-ending series of solemn amusement and recalling past joys and the feeling sad because they are never to come again. Isn't that so true? Let me change the color here. That way it's a different color. Isn't that so true? I mean, our mind, even he says it. This is written back in the 1850s. I know I keep on saying this, but sometimes when we're reading, besides the old English he's using words that we don't usually use today, or using great big long sentences that are hard to read a lot of times, is that he even says it, that the mind, I don't know why, our mind likes to go back in the past, okay? It likes to mourn on the past. And that's why he says it likes to recall the past and mourn over it. How many of us are really guilty of that? And how often do we really do it? That's another kicker in here. But the real self, the spirit, cares relatively little for its past. It courts change. Isn't it so true? Your real self, the spirit, it courts change. It wants change. 2, expects to be different individual, and a thought a year hence from that it is today. It is willing 1,000 years hence to forget who or what it is today, for it knows that this intense desire to remember itself for what it has been retards its advancement toward greater power and greater pleasure. That was a rough sentence. I don't know if something got taken out, but it didn't really make sense until this last little paragraph. I think something got taken out here. It just kind of, there's a period here, but it just kind of, I think this version is, a sentence or two was taken out. Sorry about that. But it just kind of jumped. But I like the last part of this, because it says, it is willing 1,000 years hence to forget who or what it is today. For it knows that this intense desire to remember itself for what it has been retards its advance toward greater power and greater pleasure. So what he's saying is, when you're constantly looking backwards, it basically stops you in the track of trying to advance forwards. Okay, when you're trying to manifest, abundance, you're trying to manifest success, you're trying to manifest your dream house, your dream car, you're trying to manifest your dream job. Well, when you're constantly looking back in the past, it stops you from advancing forward. It literally stops you in your tracks. That's what he's saying. What care you for what you were 1,000 or 5,000 years ago? Yet then you were something, and something far less than what you are today. You are curious, you may answer to know what you were. Yes, but in curiosity, worth gratifying, as far as such gratification, you must pay the price of dragging after you 100 corpses of your dead selves. Those selves, those existences have done their work for you. In doing that work, they brought you possibility, more pain than pleasure. Do you ever want to bear with you the memory and burden of that pain? Especially when such burden brings more pain and deprives you of pleasure. It's like the bird that should insist on carrying with it always a shell from which it is hatched. If you have a sad remembrance, fling it off. If you can't fling it off, demand of the supreme power aid to help you do so, and such aid will come. If you want to grow old, feeble, gray, and withered, go at once and live in your past and regret your youth. Go and to revisit places and houses where you lived 20, 30, 40 years ago. Call the dead, mourn over them, live in remembrance over the joys you had there, and say they are gone and fled, and you will never come again. this last was actually really good than the beginning. The beginning of this paragraph, they've had to leave out a couple sentences just when they were doing this PDF. But 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 uh, but I like the last half of this, especially when he says, do you want to ever to bear with the memory a burden of that pain? And a lot of times, what happens, the reason why it halts us, okay, the reason why it stops us, the reason why it stops manifesting, is because when you're remembering in the past, it brings up an emotion in you. Okay, then you go inside your imagination, and you're remembering, you're playing this imaginal scene inside your imagination. Now, it could be a negative scene. It could bring up, a sad emotions. But remember, your subconscious mind, when you're attracting with manifesting, your subconscious mind is what it is. It just is. Okay, it doesn't play favorites. It's just giving you whatever you focus on. It's giving you whatever you're emotional to. Okay, it's responding by your focus and your emotion. So whatever you're emotional about, it's going to give you more of that. So that's why it really halts you. That's why it really stops you, because when you start thinking in the past, maybe you listen to a song and it's a sad song, and you start remembering 10 years ago, and you're in that state. Sometimes once something puts you in that state, sometimes we're in that state all day long, or we'll be in and out of that state all day long, and we bring such a natural emotion to it, and our subconscious mind says, hey, Chad must like this. I'm going to bring him more similar circumstances of what he's emotional about. That's why it halts you. That's why it stops your progress. Because you can't move forward if you're constantly moving backwards. And I love, like, when he was kind of going off on that, like really, you're going back and visiting old places you used to grow up. Now this is something that really spoke loud to me, because I lived in California for 18 years, grew up in Ohio, and now I live in Thailand. I come back and I visit, but lots of times when I visit here, it's so easy for me to be put into a state of high school, or miss high school, or want to redo, or go back where I used to grow up, or my old high school. You know what I mean? To kind of remince those memories. But lots of times thinking backwards, it puts me in such a sad state, because I'm thinking backwards. In doing so, you are fastening dead selves all over you. If we came into another physical life with a memory of the last one, we should come into the world physically as a miniature, decrepit, grizzled old men and women. Youth physically is fresh and blooming because it packs no past sad material remembrances with it. A girl is beautiful because her spirit has flung off the past and sad remembrance of its previous life, and has therefore a chance for a period to assert itself. A woman commences to age, then she commences to load up with regrets over her past but 20 years gone. And he's saying this a little bit confusing, especially in this chapter. But isn't it weird, even nowadays, like when you start regretting the past, or you start getting, anxious, no matter you're thinking back to the past, no matter that's what's causing worry and anxiety, and he's talking about how it ages you. But isn't it so true, when you're worried, have anxiety, and you're thinking back in the past, isn't it so true that one can look more tired, they don't look fresh, they don't look like they sleep well. That's the best way to put it. You ever see someone and it doesn't look like they sleep really good because they look more haggard, they have more worry on their face, they have more wrinkles or lines. Even the same thing happens to me. Like if I'm more worried and stressed, I'm not sleeping good, I can tell on my face. If I'm way stressed out, I have way more gray hair than if I do when I'm not stressed out. Almost my gray hair goes away. Or a lot of it goes away. Maybe not all of it, but a lot of it goes away. Now, isn't it so true how he keeps on, especially a lot of these chapters, he keeps on saying how we age, to remain young and youthful. But he's really referring to the mind, but the mind and body is attached. Remember that. Your spirit demands for the body it uses grace, agility of movement, and personal beauty, for it is made in the image of God and the infinite mind and life. Beauty, grace, and agility are the characteristics of that mind. And in that phase of existence we call childhood and youth, the spirit has a chance to assert itself, to assert its desire for beauty and agility, because it has not as yet loaded up the false beliefs and regrets. The liveliness, sprightliness, and the untiring playfulness of the boy or girl of 10 or 12 is due to the gladness of a spirit relieved of the burden that is carried in a past existence. That burden was one of the thoughts unprofitable to carry. You would physically have the agility you had at 15 could you fling off the burden of the sad remembrance and the belief in error that you have been loading up with these 20 or 30 years past. Isn't this so true? Especially when we think back when we were a kid. Isn't it amazing when we were a kid? Even think about manifesting in dreams, thinking about your wants and desires, something simple. Isn't it so weird how, if you think back to when you were 10 years old, how, you weren't concerned about money. Okay? You weren't concerned about none of that. Okay, we get stressed over money today. We make everything about money today. Okay? That's why we can't manifest other things, because we get so worried about money. So worried about how we're going to make a living. But when we were 10 years old, we didn't worry about that. Okay, if you have a 10-year-old son or daughter right now, go and play imagination game with them. They're way better with you with it. Unless the school system have kind of taught it out of them when they're 10, 11, 12 years old, or maybe you have to go back earlier. But ask them what they want. Most of the time they just spurt things off really quick. Ask them what they want for their birthday. I want this, I want that. Ask them what they want for Christmas. I want this, I want that. They could sit down and fill up a whole page of what their wants and desires are. When you sit down as an older adult, you write one or two things and that's it. You know what I mean? There's a massively huge difference between when you were a kid and you are now. Like in the realm of what we're talking about. A huge difference. Kids just live carefree. Isn't it amazing with kids? They only want to do what they love and they like, and they're so much in the moment. If you have a girl, they could be playing Barbies, have a Barbie house for hours. For hours just playing, or go outside and play for hours of just being tuned to it. And yet we can't even go to a get together with somebody without constantly looking at our watch, constantly seeing what time it is, constantly our body's there, but our mind wants to be at home. We're vastly way more different than kids. But most of the time we've gotten worse than going back to kind of how we were as a kid, as far as talking about the joy we have, our wants and desires. You can commence the uploading process now by resolving with the aid of the Supreme Power to fling off the remembrance of everything in the past that has annoyed you, everything you regret, everything you have mourned over. God never mourns or regrets. You, as a spirit, are made in His image. God is eternal life, joy, and serenity. The more of these characteristics you reflect, the nearer are you to the infinite Spirit of God. You have buried your dearest on earth. You do them no good by your sad thoughts concerning them. You place bar twixt their spirit and yours, and thinking of them as lost. You may in so doing not only increase and encourage in them a sad mental condition, but bring their gloomy mental condition on yourself, as many do in grieving. The greatest good you can do them is to think of them as alive like ourselves, and to fling their graves, tombstones, coffins, shrouds, and gaslessness out of our minds. If we cannot do so of ourselves, let us demand help of the Supreme Power to do it. We often make those who have lost their bodies feel dead when we think of them as such. If we do this, they will throw back their thoughts of deadness on us. Keep out of the graveyards. It may seem to some that I am cold and unfeeling to say this, But the truth, as it presents itself to me, says that the graveyard where your loved ones do not lie is spiritually a most unhealthy place to visit. They are full of the thought of regret, death, and decay. When you visit them, you incorporate such thought into yourself. It is hostile and killing to youth, vigor, elasticity, cheerfulness, and life. Isn't that so interesting? Now, I don't go to graveyards anymore. And it's not because of this. I'm just not in the habit of going. Sometimes I'll go. Sometimes I'll get in my mind to go like visit my dad and stuff like that. But isn't it so amazing? Like when he's explaining, and he's explaining it from a deeper level of thought, because he knows it puts you in that state for that time being. It puts you in that sad state for that time being. Our graveyards are full of lies. We place a stone over the cast-off body of a friend. We place on that stone the word dead or died. That is not true. Your friend is not dead. It is only the body he used that lies there. But that grave is planted in your memory, and your friend in your mind lies in it. Do what we will, try to believe what we may of the eternal prolongation of life and the impossibility of anything like death in the universe. We cannot help making ourselves, when we think of that grave or revisit it, an image of that friend as dead and decaying in his or her coffin. This image we fasten in our minds, and in doing so we fasten ourselves that thought of gloom, death, and decay. The thoughts of decay and death are things and forces. When we keep them in so much in mind, we add elements of decay to the body. Isn't it so weird? Because thoughts are things, especially in this book, he's really diving. Of course, since we're on chapter 5, and if you've stayed up to this point, of course he's diving super, super deep, and he's really connecting the mind and the body, and he's connecting our thoughts to the mind and our body, and even in previous chapters, he's connecting our thoughts, how our thoughts are influencing other people. He's going super deep with this, especially if you're new to this material. More of the thoughts and new to manifesting, really going deep. And isn't it weird how when he's connecting our thoughts to the body, is that when we're constantly revisiting the graves, revisiting loved ones, is that he says the thoughts of decay and death are things and forces. When we keep them so much in our mind, we add elements of decay to our own body. We need as much as possible to fasten our thought on life and increasing life greater in this activity than any we have ever realized. That is not gained by looking backward, look forward. Every regret, every mournful thought takes so much out of our life. It is the force used to pile on more misery. It is force used to strengthen the habit of regretting. It is a force used to make the mind color everything with a tinge of sadness. And the longer you use force in this way, the darker will grow the tinge. Isn't it so true? I'm right here, right when I highlighted. Every regret, every mournful thought takes so much out of our life. Okay, think about what we're doing when we regret, we're mournful, we're sad. Most of the time when we're sad, maybe we went through a breakup. Okay, and we're sad. Maybe something really happened and remind us in our past. And we can sit there the entire day and sit in that state. It stops your progress. That's what it does. It halts you, and then you actually start to move backwards because you start manifesting on that level of vibration. And lots of times we can be in this state for several days, maybe weeks and months. Because we're constantly, remember, our mind, our thoughts work on redundancy. We're constantly thinking the same thoughts over and over and over. So that's why we have to be so careful on what are we thinking. What are we filling our minds with? Also, when we are ever going back in memory to the past and living in it in preference to the present, we are bringing back ourselves, the old moods of mind, the mental conditions belonging to that past. Isn't that amazing? When we're thinking in the past and we're dwelling in the past, we're bringing on like old habits, old moods that we used to have. Isn't that weird? I mean, have you ever experienced that? Like sometimes maybe you moved away. Maybe it's something like me. Like I moved to California, lived in California 18 years, and I came back. But when I come back, isn't it weird how you kind of step back in the past? You start having like old habits and old moods that you once had. Isn't it weird how that happens? This feeling constantly indulged in will bring on some form of physical ailment. The ailment belongs to a condition of the mind which we should be done with forever. If we are looking forward, we shall shake it off and be better in health than ever. If the predominant mood of our minds is that of looking backward, the ultimate result will be serious to the body. Listen, anything predominant, listen what he says. If the predominant mood of our minds is that of looking backwards, constantly looking in the past, the ultimate result will be serious to the body. In the world's business, your activity, enterprising, pushing man affairs, spends little time in sad reminiscence. If he did his world, let me read that paragraph over again. In the world's business, your active, enterprising, pushing man of affairs spends little time in sad reminiscence. If he did his business would suffer. His thought is forward. That thought is the real force which pushes his business forward. If he spent it in sad memories of the past, his business will go backward. He works his success, so far as he does really succeed, by the spiritual law, though he may not know it. So this is where kind of like here, if you are like kind of moving forward in success, if you are successful, what he's talking about, most people that are successful, most people are wealthy, they don't know why they're wealthy. Well, and I love what Bob Proctor would say. Bob Proctor would always call these people unconscious competent. Meaning they're successful, but they don't know why they're successful. They don't really know the ingredient that made them successful. Okay? They're unconscious competent. Okay, I love that when Bob Proctor would say that. You may be saying, I have failed in life and shall always be a failure. That is because you are ever leaking back, living in your failure and thereby bringing to you more failure. See, this is the laws of the universe. If you have failed in life and you say to yourself, I have failed in life, if you always say to yourself, I'm a failure, I failed in life, I always make mistakes, you always say this stuff to you, that is because you're ever leaking back. You're always thinking backwards, living in your failure and thereby bringing to you more failure. Okay, that's like attracts like. Whatever you focus on is coming to you. Reverse this attitude of mind. Work it the other way and live in future success. See, what we have to understand with manifesting, with law of attraction, law of assumption, no matter what terminology you want to use, don't get caught up in this terminology. It pretty much all means the same thing. Okay, is that whatever we focus on comes to us. That's what we have to understand. That's a general law of attraction. Whatever we bring our attention to comes to us, positive or negative. That's what we have to understand. That's what we have to come to terms with. Okay, in this example here is if someone's always saying to themselves, I failed in life, I'm a failure, I will always be a failure, I'll always make mistakes, I'm never moving forward, and this is their dominant thoughts, what they're thinking, well, the laws of the universe is going to give you exactly that. It's not bias. It doesn't play favorites. It doesn't hate you. It's just giving to you what is. It's giving to you what your dominant thoughts are. That's what we have to understand. But what he's saying here, what Prentice Mulford is saying is, you can reverse this attitude of mind. You can reverse it and work it the other way and live in future success. Because the laws of the universe, it's on the same line. If you're thinking negative, If you're thinking negative, well, there has to be a positive. If there's an up, there has to be a down. If there's a hot, there has to be a cold. The laws of the universe are working on the same sphere. That's what he's saying. Why do you say, I am always sick? Because you are looking back, living in your past ailments, and thereby bringing more on you. I've heard the expression used, when the earth was young, as if the planet was now in its dotage and going to decay. In the sense of freshness, increase of life, refinement, and purity in every form of life, be that of man, animal, vegetable, and farther on, this earth never was so young as it is today. Youth is life, growing and increasing in beauty and power. It is not the cruder commencement of life. The so-called barren rock contains elements which will help to form the future tree and flower. Is that the part of the rock which enters into the tree and flower, increasing or decreasing life? It changes only into a higher and more beautiful expression of life. So do we, from age to age, the rock crumbles that we may live in this higher form. The old mind must crumble and pass away to give place to the new. Listen to this. Our old mind, the old way of thinking, that's what he's saying. Our old ways, the old way of thinking, the past must crumble and pass away to give place to the new. And make us the newer spiritual being. As the old mind crumbles, so will the old body. For the spiritual change must be accompanied by the physical change. But if you live in understanding and spirit of this law, you need not lose a physical body, but you have ever changing for the better as you live in spiritual belief. As the old life goes out, the new comes in. Isn't it amazing what he said here, right in the last paragraph, right in the last sentence, I mean. As you live in a spiritual belief, as the old life goes out, the new life has to come in. Okay, we're not doing what he's saying, the laws of the universe here, we're not doing the same thing at the same time. You're not thinking back in your past and dwelling on the past at the same time living in the future. You're doing one or the other. Okay, the same isn't happening all at the same time. It seems like it is, but it's really not in terms of a spiritual being, in terms of what we're talking about. And this is what he's saying here. As you live in a spiritual belief, as the old life goes out, as you stop dwelling in the past, your new life comes in. Okay, now if you're dwelling in the past, you living in present moment, you're not in present moment because you're dwelling in the past. You're doing one or the other. You have to understand this. Even for me, this is speaking loud to me because you're not doing two things at the same time. Only one thing is taking place at one time. Nothing in nature, nothing in the universe is at standstill. Nothing goes backwards. A gigantic, inconceivable force and wisdom moves all things forward to get toward greater and higher powers and possibilities. You are included in and part of this force. There is of you an embryo, the power preventing the physical body your spirit uses from decaying, and the power also using it in ways which even the fiction of today would discard as too wild for the pages of the novel. For your spirit youth, an ever-growing youth, is an eternal heritage. If your body has aged, that is no sign that your spirit has aged. The spirit cannot grow old in the material sense, any more than the sunlight can grow old. If your body has aged, it is because the body has become the material likeness and expression of a false self or shell which has formed in your spirit. Now this brings up a lot of things. See, I don't think he's really saying our body isn't going to age, but in a retrospect of it. But what he is saying that if you constantly hold, you're dwelling on the past, you're dwelling on past things that put you in sad states, sad mental states. You're constantly stressed and worried and fear, but that's what's going to bring into it. It's going to age you. It's going to age you quicker. And if you're a little bit older, even like I'm in my 40s, even when I look back at high school, and I look back at high school pictures and stuff like that, and it's amazing to me. I mean, I look younger than most people in high school. Like a lot of people I graduated with look 10 years, 15 years older than I do today. And so it's kind of how you age and how the stress of life is going to age you. Now, sometimes, yes, it's genetics and so forth. And, it's your diet and your health. Diet and health, we're not talking about here. But even when I used to dive really deep into health, okay, and really deep in spirituality, really going back to spiritual times and the mind and the body, and if we were really eating like heirloom foods, okay, with all the minerals, all the enzymes, okay, and we're not doing that today just because of commercial farming. Everything is genetically modified, meaning like everything, when we're eating foods, it's mineral deficient. Then on top of it, we're eating pre-made, pre-packaged, or pre-cooked foods, which has no nutritional value at all, because when it's pre-made, pre-packaged, and pre-cooked, it destroys all the enzymes, it destroys all the vitamins. Then they fortify the vitamins back into it, but when they fortify the vitamins and minerals back into our food, it's a chemical form of that vitamin or mineral or enzyme, which your body cannot use. So, with that long explanation there, is when I used to do massive research on this, is that, our body is not supposed to age. Okay. Now, I don't know at what point that we would stop aging. Maybe it would be 30 years old, and then we would totally just stop aging. Okay. If we're actually given the right elements to live, our body isn't supposed to age, because it's scientifically proven our body, all of our cells regenerate. Okay. It takes about 1 year for everything in our total body to actually regenerate into new. So if our body and our cells are regenerating into new, that means we have a new body every single year. Okay, so in retrospect, we're not supposed to age, but what's happening now is our cells and our body and our organs are not regenerating like they should. They're degenerating. So that's what causes aging. And what speeds up aging is stuff that Prentice Mulford is talking about. Now, I'm kind of going deep with you. You may or may not believe it, but that's just my thoughts, and just through research and living a lifestyle of it, or trying my best to live a lifestyle. That's what I found. That's what I found to believe. And when you're connecting spiritual, you're connecting manifesting, you're going deep with it. All the signs are there. You know what I mean? In the new life to come to our race, when we have learned to be ever looking forward to the greater joys to come, and cease to look backward and drag the dead past with us, men and women are to have bodies far more beautiful and graceful than those of today. Listen to this. I'm going to read this one more time. This was very interesting. Listen very closely what he's saying. In the new life to come to our race, when we have learned to be ever looking forward to the greater joys to come, and cease to look backward and drag the dead past with us, men and women are to have bodies far more beautiful and graceful than those of today, because their bodies will image or reflect their thoughts, and their thoughts will have ever be fixed on what is beautiful and symmetrical. They will know that what is to come and what is in store for them out of the richness of the infinite mind must exceed anything they have realized in the past. Today, with a great majority of people, their attitude of mind is directly the reverse, owing to the little trust they have put in the power of the theologian calls God. They are ever in their mind saying, there are no joys to come for us like our past joys. Our youth has fled. Our future on earth is tame and dull. It is as dust and ashes. Isn't this so true? He explained it kind of weird, but this kind of brings up, even when I went off to college, I had of course I had friends, and and even my best friend, and his name was Brian, and we would, and when it comes to like spring break, of course, you're in college, you want to go off to spring break and do things and enjoy life, and his dad would always tell him that, hey, go enjoy life. These are going to be the best years of your life. College is going to be the best years. Go have fun. Go go on spring break. And isn't it so funny that that people think that way. Like you're young, these are the best years of your life, but as you grow older, it's not. You know what I mean? The reason why as you grow older, it's not the best years of your life is because you're constantly looking backward as what it used to be. Rather than let the dead bury the dead, stop looking backwards and only look forward. Because as you only look forward, the joys are still there. But isn't it weird? People will always say things like that. These are going to be the best years. And they're giving you great advice, but at the same time, they're thinking since they're older because they're a parent, that their best time, their best years are over now. But it's not, because it's over in their mind because they're looking in the past. They're not looking forward into the future. The truth that life does not end with the death of the body makes slow progress in fixing itself firmly in our minds. The kind of life a man may be living here at 70 does not end in the grave. It continues straight on. The old man, as we call him, wakes up in the other side of life after losing his body, an old man still. If he is one of those old men who have outlived their day and generation, who lived in their physical past and look back on it with regret, who have become too old to learn and think they have got through with it all, he will be just such an old man in the world of the spirit. There is no sudden transformation into youth on the death of the worn out, decrepit body. As a tree falls, so does it lie for a period, even in the after. But in this state, he cannot stay forever. He must grow, not in age, but youth. To do this, it is necessary not only that he should leave the old body, but the old material mind that made that body. His spirit throws off that mind, which he gains a new body, or is reincarnated, and he throws it off because he loses the recollection of all past sad memories and regrets. Now I want you to listen to this short little paragraph. There's a couple sentences here, but it speaks loud. It speaks loud to me anyway. The man should in mind be always the boy, the woman, the girl. You can as man or woman be always boy or girl in spirit without being silly or losing real dignity. You can have all the playfulness of youth with the wisdom of maturity. To have a clear, powerful mind, you need not to be an owl. Now you bring up like an owl because I remember as a kid, my mom used to love owls. You know, sometimes we would see them. I haven't seen one for a long time, by the way. But see them outside. She would collect owls and collect little figurines of owls. But I think the reason why he brings up an owl is because when you look at an owl's just sitting there. He looks super stern and super serious. You ever look at a picture of an owl? Maybe you haven't seen an owl for a long time, but even go on Google and look back at pictures of owls. Look how serious they look. Look how stern they look. And even though they're cute, but they have such a serious demeanor to them. That's why he's using the owl as a reference here. To have a clear, powerful mind, you need not be an owl. But I love what he's saying here, because even though you're an adult, he's saying your spirit, your mind should be as playful as when you used to be a kid. That's what he's saying. He's not saying you turn into a kid, okay, and you become super irresponsible. He's not saying that, but he's saying being youthful in your spirit. Okay, you have that silliness as a kid. Okay, now read it one more time, then we'll move on, because it's just a couple sentences, but it's so powerful. The man should in mind be always the boy, the woman, the girl. The man should in mind always be that little boy, that little kid, the little girl. You can as man and woman be always the little boy, little girl in spirit without being silly or losing real dignity. Okay, what he's talking about here, without being irresponsible with life. You can be playful and fun and joy of that as a kid. But for some reason, we lose that as an adult. Isn't it so true? We lose it. We become too serious. We take life too serious. You can have all the playfulness of youth with the wisdom of maturity. You can have both. You can have playfulness of a youth with the wisdom of maturity of an adult. To have a clear, powerful mind, you need not be an owl. There may be for a period a certain use for us to going back to our more recent past lives and for a time living in them. Sometimes we are pushed back temporarily into some old condition of mind, some old experience in order to make us more alive than ever to the rags and taters of errors and beliefs still clinging to us. This may come of revisiting places and people from whom we have long been separated. For a time during such visit, old associations, the moods connected with them, and possibly old habits we thought long since cast off, resume their sway. We may become for a period absorbed and swallowed up in the old life. We resume temporarily an old mind or mental condition that was formerly our permanent one in that place or association. But after a little, the new mind, the new self into which we have grown during the long absence antagonizes the old. It feels aversion and disgust for the narrow life, the false beliefs and the dull, purposeless lives about it. It, the spirit, refuses to have anything to do with the old. Then comes a conflict between our two minds, the old and the new, which may result in a temporary physical sickness. Our old life or self rises as if it were out of its grave and tries to fasten itself on the new and even rule the new. The new self rejects the corpse with a horror. But through thus seeing the corpse, it sees also fragments of the old self, which, unperceived, have all along been adhering to the new. We do not get rid of error and belief all at once, and often unconsciously retain shreds of such belief when we imagine ourselves entirely rid of them. These shreds are the remains of the old thoughts and the former mental conditions. Your new mind, so awakened, arises and pushes off what it finds left on it of the old. This pushing off is accompanied by the physical disturbance, because your spirit puts all its force in rejecting these fragments of the former self, as you might put all your physical strength in pushing off a snake. Our old errors and belief must be so pushed off before the new thoughts, which come in as the old go out, can have full sway. If your spirit has contentedly and blindly carrying any scorpion of false belief, you would tumble into the pit eventually, as so many are now doing. When you live several years in any certain house or town or locality, you make a spiritual self belonging to that locality. Every house, tree, road, or other object you have long been in the habit of seeing there has a part of that self and thought attached to it. Every person who knows you there has in his or her mind the self you make there and puts that self out. Then they meet you and talk to you. If you had years before in that place the reputation of being weak and vacillating and impractical or intemperate, and you return to the people who knew you as such, although you may have changed for the better, you are very liable to their thought and recollection of you, to have this old self pushed back on you, and as a result, you may for a period feel much like your former self. Isn't it so true? Have you ever had this happen? Is maybe the town you grew up in, all your best friends, and even your family, even like for my instance, when I moved to California, they didn't see me as much. Yes, they talked to me on the phone, but I lived in California for 18 years. Then when I come back, I can come back as a totally different person. Okay, more successful, more, not even successful, more abundant, more successful, being more confident, not as timid, being more decisive, not indecisive, knowing what I want, not what I don't want. You know what I mean? But isn't it amazing how when we come back, and we stay for a while, okay, they remember you how you once were. And they'll treat you how you once were. Okay, and that's what he's saying. For a time, your old self was pushed back on you because that's how they remember you. They're not remembering you as a new person you are today, but they don't know that person. They just remember that old self. And I think most of us have experienced that to some source. If you haven't experienced it, you will. Okay, at some, either at family, parents, or even a friend, a best friend you haven't seen for a long time, you will experience it at some time. You return to such a place after a long absence. And this is the example I just gave, but he's given an example as well in this giant paragraph right here. This giant paragraph right here. That's where we are. You return to such a place after a long absence. You have during the absence changed radically in belief. You bring with you a different mind. You are in reality a different person. But the old you, the old self of former years will rise from every familiar object to meet you. It will come out the houses formerly inhabited by your friends. Though not tenanted by strangers, you will find it in the village of church, the old schoolhouse, the very rails and fence posts familiar to you long years before. More than all, it will come out the recollection of the people who only knew you for what you were, say 20 years before. Every person strengthened with you his image of your former self. You talk with them on the plane of that previous life or self. For the time being, you ignore yourself as it now thinks and believes. You put aside your newer self, not wishing to obtrude on your friends' opinions, which to them may be unpleasant or seem wild and visionary. You meet perhaps 25 or 30 people who know you only as your former self. And with all these who act out the old self and repress the new, this for a time makes the old dead self very strong. You cannot keep this up. You cannot warm the old corpse of yourself into life. If you try to be and live your former self, you will become depressed mentally and very likely sick physically. You may find yourself going into moods of mind particular to your former life, which you thought you had gone forever. You may find yourself beset with physical ailment, also particular to that period from which you had not suffered for years. Such ailments are not real. They are but the thoughts and wrong beliefs which your old you is trying to fasten on you. I visited recently a place from which I had been absent 25 years. I had spent there a portion of my physical youth and had lived there with a mind or belief very different from that I which entertain now. I returned to find the place dead in more senses than one. The majority of my old acquaintances had passed away. The remains lay in the graveyards. But I realized this deadness still more among my contemporaries, who were said to be living. They had lost the spur and activity of their youthful ambition. They had resigned themselves to growing old. They have lived mostly in the past, talked of the past, good old times, and compared the present and future unfavorably with the past. They were in mind about where I left them 25 years before, and about where I was in mind when I did leave them. Isn't this so true? And he's giving his experience of going back to his hometown. He's been away for 25 years. And I love this, where he says it at the end, is that when he did meet some of his old-time friends, old-time acquaintances that were still alive, because it's been 25 years, I'm not too sure how old he was when he left his hometown. But isn't it weird? Isn't it so true today? Exactly what he said in the last sentence here. He says, they lived mostly in the past, talked about the past, talked about the good old times, and compared the present and the future unfavorably with the past. They were in mind about where I left them 25 years ago. Isn't it so true? Like when you move away, like when I moved to California 18 years ago, like you're advancing, you're developing your mind, you're moving forward. But when you come back to your hometown, you meet people that were exactly the same as when you left 20 years ago. They're exactly the same in mind. Their thoughts are exactly the same, and they live in the past also. But isn't it so true that they're not growing, they're not moving forward? Remember, energy is not stagnant here. And he said this in a different way here a couple pages back. Like the universe is always moving. Energy is always moving. Energy is not stagnant. And what this means is, if energy is ever flowing, is that we're either getting better or we're getting worse. We're either moving forward or we're moving backward. Okay, we're not staying stagnant. We're not staying in one place. We're either slowly getting better or we're slowly getting worse. And this is evident, okay, if you don't believe this, you will believe this when I say this, is if someone used to be in great shape, maybe you knew them in high school, they were in great shape, but after they graduate high school, you haven't seen them for 10 years, you haven't seen them for 1 decade. Okay, let's say in those 10 years, they never went to the gym, they stopped working out, they stopped being active, they don't have any type of hobbies that keep them active, they literally stopped being active for 10 years. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think they're going to stay in awesome shape that you once knew them? Or do you think they're going to get out of shape? Well, I think we all could agree that they're going to get out of shape. Now, how much out of shape, I don't know. But 100% they're going to get out of shape. Okay, they're not going to stay in shape as they once were because they stopped working out. Meaning that in a working out sense, a physical fitness sense, they stopped working out, so they gradually, didn't happen overnight, they gradually got worse and worse and worse. They gradually got more and more out of shape. And so one day they wake up, look in the mirror, and they don't like their physical appearance. They don't like their body. Okay? Or they don't like when they walk upstairs, they don't like breathing heavy. Something like that. You know what I mean? When it starts to take a notice. But it didn't happen overnight. Let me finish this, but I'll reread this past sentence here because he's still going on with the current thought. That way we don't kind of get confused here. They lived mostly in their past, talked about their past, talked about their good old times, and compared the present and the future unfavorably with their past. They were in mind about where I left them 25 years before. They were exactly the same when he left 25 years before, and about where I was in mind when I did leave. Drawn temporarily into their current of thought, for old acquaintance sake, I talked with them of the past, and for the some days lived in it. At every turn I met something animate and inanimate to bring back my past life to me. Then I went to the graveyards, and in thought renewed acquaintance with those whose remains lay there. So I lived for days unconscious that in these moods a sad reminisce, I was drawing to me elements of decay sadness. First becoming very much depressed, I was next taken strangely sick and became so weak I could hardly stand. I was continually in a nervous tremor and full of vague fears. Why was this? Because in going back in my past life, I have drawn on me my old mental conditions, my old mind, my own self of that period. But since that time, I had grown in mind a new self which thought and believed very differently from old. The new self into which I have grown since leaving that locality would not accept the old. It shook it off. It was shaking off the process that caused me the physical disturbance. There was a conflict between these two forces, one trying to get in and the other to keep it out. My body was the battleground between the two. No battleground is a serene place to live on when the battle is going on. It was necessary in this case that I should look backward and live backward for a season to show me more clearly the evil of doing so. For no lesson can be really learned without an experience. It was not merely the evil of living backward in that particular locality that I come to see clearly. I saw also for the first time where I had unconsciously been living in the past and living backward in numberless ways and thereby unconsciously using up force which would have pushed me forward in every sense. I understood also, after passing through this process, why weeks before visiting that place I had felt depressed, and experienced also a return of certain moods of mind I had not felt in years. It was because my spirit was already in that place and working through this change. The culminating point was reached when my material self touched that locality. All changes were wrought in spirit, often before our material senses are in the least aware of them. Let no one imagine that because I write of these spiritual laws that I am able to live fully in accordance with them. I am not above error or mistake. I tumble into pits occasionally, get off the main track, and get on again. Power comes from looking forward with hope, of expecting and demanding the better things to come. That is the law of the infinite mind. And when we follow it, we live in that mind. Listen, this is great right here when he says this in this one sentence or two sentences here. Power comes from looking forward with hope. That's where power is. Okay, power isn't looking back on our former self, looking back at mistakes, looking back on our past. Okay, remembering the past. That's not where power is. We're moving backwards in that sense. Power comes from looking forward with hope, of expecting and demanding the better things to come. That is the law of the infinite mind. When we follow it, we live in that mind. Nature buries its dead as quickly as possible and gets them out of sight. It is better, however, to say that nature changes what it has no further use for into the terms of life. The live tree produces a new leaf with each return of spring. It will have nothing to do with its dead ones. It treasures up no withered rose leaves to bring back sad remembrance. When the tree itself ceases to produce leaf and blossom, it is changed into another form and enters into the forms of vegetation. I do not mean to imply that we should try to banish all past remembrance. Banish only the sad part. See, that's what now he's kind of clarifying what he means when we're kind of thinking back, we're kind of thinking back into the past, or we're kind of thinking back to high school or as a kid. So he says, I do not mean to imply that we should try to banish all past remembrance. Banish only the sad part. Live as much as you please in whatever of your past that has given you healthy enjoyment. There are remembrances of woodland scenes, of fields of waving rain, of blue skies, and white cape curling billows, of many other of nature's expressions as connected with your individual life. That can be recalled with pleasure and profit. These are not the decaying past. These are full of life, freshness, and beauty, and are of today. But if with these of any shade of sadness steals in, reject it instantly. Refuse to accept it. It is not a part of the cheerful, life-giving remembrance. It is the cloud which, if you could give it the least chance, will overshadow the whole and turn it to all gloom. The science of happiness lies in controlling our thought and getting thought from sources of healthy life. Listen to this. I'll read it one more time. The science of happiness, having joy and happiness in life, lies in controlling our thoughts and getting thought from sources of healthy life. When your mind is diverted from possibly the long habit of thinking and living in a gloomy side of things, and admitting gloomy thought, you will find to your surprise that the very place, the sight of which gave you pain, will give you pleasure, because you have banished a certain unhealthy mental condition, into which you before allowed yourself to drift. You can then revisit the localities connected with your past. Remember and live only in the bright, lively portion of that past, and reject all that about sad changes and those who have passed away, never to return. I have proven this to myself. Is there any use or sense in admitting things to have access to you, which only pain and injure you? Does God commend any self-destroying, suicidal act? Grief does nothing but destroy the body. So to kind of wrap this up here, this is the end of the chapter, and he ends it kind of in a unique way, but let me read it one more time. Is there any use or sense in admitting things to have access to you which only cause you pain and injure? So what he means by that is when you're constantly looking back at sad things, he said, yes, you can remember back in your past, but only think about the happy things. Banish all the things that give you emotions of sad and sickness or make you angry. Banish all those memories, but have memories only memories that brought you happy and joy. Keep those memories, but stop looking in your past. So the habit we have when we look back in our past, we have a habit of looking back, not looking past, but looking back, and we just remember things that made us sad, remember things that made us angry, remember things that we didn't like. Okay. And then this is kind of what we do in our future. We constantly think about things that we don't like, we don't want, and that's what causes a negative state, and it stirs up worry, doubt, fear, negativity, anger, like all these emotions that cause harm to our body and mind. Okay, we're doing the same thing. If we're in a habit of constantly focusing on what we don't like in the future, what we don't like in our present moment, but when we look back in our past, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to focus on what we don't like in the past. We're going to constantly bring up, stories. Have you hung around people? Maybe you do this, but have you hung around people when they tell stories of their past? They're always telling stories of something that happened to them in a negative way, something they don't like. Okay, so what he's saying is, yes, you can focus on the past. Yes, you can go back and have remembrance of the past, but only think of stuff that brought you joy, brought you fun, brought you happiness. Then banish all the negative. Then he wraps it up and he says, is there any use or sense in admitting things to have access to you, which only pain and injure you? Because that's how your thought and your body are connected. Your sad thoughts will sooner or later negatively affect your body. Does God commend any self-destroying suicidal act? Grief does nothing but destroy the body. Okay, grief, sadness, worry, doubt, fear does nothing but destroy the body. And when we continue on, it does nothing but stop your manifesting powers. It stops the abundance to come into your life. We're constantly in that state. But other than that, my friends, this wraps up chapter 5. Make sure you comment below. I love to know your thoughts, of course. Remember, I love you guys. And we will continue on to chapter 6 after this.